All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to the first and what I hope is to be many beer and broadband discussions. I think there's plenty of broadband discussions and beer that happen, but we're officially putting something together that we'd like to hopefully be a series. My name is Brian Hollister and I'm the CEO of Bonfire Engineering and Construction. I'll be your MC for today's discussion. I've been in telecom for over 20 years. Our business is focused on doing all the design from central office to all through the outside plant to the customer. We do full design and full construction of broadband networks. I'm also a big fan of beer, and I believe that collaboration and discussion is always better over a pint. And as we mentioned in the invite, our goal is to educate, connect, and inspire. And depending on how many beers we have, probably entertain. This is going to be a conversation, not a presentation, with fellow leaders across the industry. I'm very thankful for these gentlemen that have joined us today and are volunteering their time to talk about the issues that we're all facing. For those of you that are listening, if you have questions, please put them into the chat window. Nick Dinsmore on our team here will be watching those, and we'll make sure that we answer as many of those throughout today's meeting. So let's start off by doing some introductions. Let's first make sure we all have a beer in hand. Is that check mark? Beer? Beer. All right, good. We all got beers. That's great. All right, we are focused on the most important priorities. That's good. All right, so let me kick things off. I want to get started. Let's start off with Brian, then Paul, Nathan, and Daniel. Will each one of you do a brief introduction of yourself, the company you work for, a little bit of background, and that'd be great. So let's start off with you.
Absolutely. My name is Brian. I'm the CEO of Mammoth Networks and Visionary Broadband. This is a very interesting time for us right now because we've been developing broadband since 2000 and tackling that in rural markets such as Kremling. So the impetus for broadband in a COVID environment especially, which I think is a timely discussion we're going to have today, and you pair that with the elections and whatnot that's going on, and now students at home and people working from home, it's pretty rewarding what we're doing. So I oversee that broadband development and in a team that spans from Spokane, Washington to Billings, Montana, and down to Albuquerque and Durango area.
Great, thanks. Paul?
Yeah, thank you. Paul Sulish, I'm the CEO of Beer Networks. Biari was founded about 11 years ago, where our founders got together and tried to make some really cool tech and mathematics, accessible to many people. They felt that, the optimization and automation shouldn't be held tightly for a few people. It should be democratized. So over the last 11 years, we've worked across the world. Initially, we started out as a software company. And then we had to pivot into services about 5.5 years ago when we entered the US market. And since then, really, most of our work is focused on rural America, working with cooperatives, utilities, public and private power companies, those that want to overbuild with fiber. And we've also had enterprise software in other parts of the world. We've done projects in UK as well. So yeah, we've seen some interesting things. Our approach is unique because we try to use really good, interesting tech that really focuses on geospatial data. We have a digital network engineering approach, which allows us to go at speed and scale. So it's been really interesting. We roughly, at any given stage, have between 500,000 and 1 million homes passed in flight. So we try to do our bit as well. Brian, to your point, for us at Biari, we feel quite compelled that we need to step up to the mark and try to make an impact. I've got kids at home that are trying to remote learn, and I know there's others, and apparently I think the latest stats is 9 out of 10 kids globally are at home, which is a huge challenge, not only for us parents, but for the kids trying to learn. So yeah, I think we all have a duty and an obligation, and that's what's keeping me up at night, but also giving me some fire to crack on and try to do our bit.
Great, absolutely. Nathan, Carbo.
And to unmute myself there. Hey, so my name's Nathan. I'm with System Services Broadband. We're a Mid-South based OSP contract firm. We primarily deal with HFC and fiber to the home networks. We have the same customer base we've been working with for quite a long time. It's pretty simple. That's all. That's what we do. We're just the contractor. We're the muscle.
Cool. Thanks, Nathan. All right. Mr. Danny Reed, you're up next, sir.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Brian. I'm Danny Reed. I'm the owner of Splash Fiber. So Splash stands for Splice and Lash. So we do mostly aerial fiber construction installation. And then we also splice and test, do all sorts of different testing on fiber. My background's been mostly in fiber specifically. I started in the industry after I got out of the Army several years ago and worked for JDSU for a while and kind of learned the technology behind fiber and coax and also twisted pair, but mostly fiber. So we do a lot with fiber to the home. We've been doing a lot with small cell lately, but mostly outside plant construction.
Great. Thanks, Danny. Thank you, everyone. All right, great. So I think we have a great roundtable today, a lot of different perspectives all around, of course, the broadband industry. So let's kind of get things started off here. I think clearly the main topic of conversation is not just our industry, but across all our businesses is how we're running the business in today's environment, keeping our people engaged, healthy, happy mentally, and also planning for post-pandemic growth. So let's start off with the people. As I know, all three are, when you think about it, obviously everything we all do, except for Paul, has a lot of horsepower behind the scenes, of course, with the code that they've created, but still has an amazing amount of people, right? We all have a ton of people in this business. So I guess let's start off with really thinking about the people and the things that we're trying to do to keep our teams focused on doing the best job they can in this crazy environment. So let's start off with Brian. Mr. Worthen, I know you've been obviously in the industry for a long time. How are your people handling this change, the new normal, as we're all starting to say, and how are you helping them through it?
Well, in our business, it's easy to put things in perspective because we talk about this a lot here. We're powering up 911 centers. We're powering up hospitals. We're the redundancy for a number of hospitals, school districts, right? So when we're counties, cities, so as a provider of those services, when I'm talking to my staff, it's easy to say the community relies on you, right? But there's also, that's the interesting thing about the situation we're in today is there's also the aspect of keeping your employees healthy. And so we find ourselves actually empowering our employees and telling more stories about, hey, what you're doing is helping planes land, and the hospital in Wyoming treating the most COVID patients, we're providing the internet there, right? It drives that home. But it's that perspective that's needed because there's a dichotomy, right? There's the group of admin folks that can work remote and work from home. And then there's the field personnel that really that's what they do, right? So there's a lot of attention right now to grocery workers and people stocking shelves, and the appreciation, the trucking industry. And I think that when this is all said and done, I think there's going to be appreciation for what we're doing, all of us on this call, right? Because we're working towards keeping people connected, and we're seeing gaps in student connectivity, home connectivity, and talking to our employees about that solution and them being a part of that is helping with that discussion. But on the flip side, we have to tell we're having to tell employees, make good decisions, protect yourself. For even the residential installs, we're starting to install in the garage or other locations where there's not as much customer interaction. And I even said it's protecting our employees and their health, but there's also an aspect of protecting our customers. So it's a storytelling process and it's an engagement process, and we find a need to talk to our employees more during this time. You're on mute, Brian.
Gosh, dang it. Sorry, guys. Well, I feel we're in the same boat. I feel like it's constant engagement. There's never, there's not ever enough, right? And one of the things we've been starting to do a lot is daily huddles with each work group. A quick check-in, how you doing? What's going on? You know, obviously leveraging video conferencing as much as possible. But we're like you. We have some of our team that was able to work remotely very easily, engineering and back office. But of course, the folks that are out on the front lines in the field every day, very, very, very different. So we've had to do a lot of changes and think through a lot of those kinds of components. Before I call the next person out, I guess one quick thing is I'm kind of curious to how many of you right now are doing this conference or this call, let's not call it a conference, with kids at home? Okay, we just said I got everyone. All right, I was just kind of curious, right? Because it's like the new norm, right? I think we were laughing right before we hit record as other folks came in, and we all had to, you know, please, kids, I know it's been okay to, you know, come in and break in on conference calls because they love it. I have an 8 and 10-year-old, but you know, had to really lay down the law, like please give Daddy 1 hour today. So I think we're all living in this this new norm. So let's move forward. So Paul, let's move to you. I know your team obviously is more office bound and obviously spread out geographically. You know, how has it been transitioning your team to 100% remote work environment? You know, what types of tools are you guys using? Challenges that you've encountered with moving your team suddenly, obviously, to an all remote situation?
Sure. So I think, yeah, look, we've, in some ways, I suppose we're fortunate that, you know, we're not on the front lines, so to speak. We do have a number of offices around the world where people typically come in and do their work. Most of the work we do is cloud-based systems. We use AWS heavily for most of our work. We use the Google Suite for docs and other ways to collaborate on documentation. You know, we use Slack, we use FlowDoc. We've got a lot of young tech-savvy people, so they love their tools and their tech. So we often try to, you know, bring in new things, see if they work for the broader team. So from that perspective, we felt we were appropriately ready to take on that challenge. So the challenges were more around people that could, you know, no longer could come into an office and feel, you know, and have that aspect of camaraderie and that social aspect of being around their teammates, which a lot of them really enjoyed, right? So, you know, even though we have daily rhythms where everyone does a daily in the morning, it's a stand-up, so it's 15 minutes, it's pretty quick, just to get aligned and get on with the day. Some of us have been doing that remotely anyway via, you know, Google Hangouts or Zoom, but there were large concentrations of people in our Australian offices and the Philippines that would come in every day and, you know, love the social aspect of their job. So there was a tough transition when we said, look, initially we said, you know, if you can work from home, please work from home. And then over the course of a couple of weeks, obviously we needed to lock that down. And as an executive team, we decided that we mandated working from home. And then we, you know, we had instances where in certain areas of the Philippines, there wasn't great internet. So we managed to organize dongles to be sent out to those employees so they could work effectively. You know, and something that we wanted to stress with everyone from the get-go is, look, we don't expect everyone to feel like they're 100% productive, they're efficient. This is different. It's okay. You know, we expect the dips in productivity. It's fine. Everyone's in the same boat. Our customers get it. Excuse me. So that we kept stressing that pretty regularly. As an executive team, we set up a daily COVID-19 call in the afternoons where we checked in between us and each of us were checking in on other staff who were checking in on other staff. We had phone trees set up by our staff. We had YouTube channels to show how people exercise. So really going above and beyond the work and trying to keep things social, you know, keeping an ear out and an eye out for each other in terms of not only, you know, how we're feeling about work, but how we're feeling as people. So to the extent that we said, look, we get it if you don't want to have your video on because you haven't showered yet, but we'd really rather see your face because we want to see your body language. Are you doing okay? You know, what do you need from us? What else can we do? So that worked really well, and the team stepped up, you know, in a fantastic fashion globally. And as I said, we sort of try to keep check on each other from, you know, mental health, and a lot of us, you know, everyone's going through different things in a different way. As you pointed out, you know, Brian, I've got 3 kids at home, and, you know, everyone's got different reality of what they're trying to fit in around work and things like that. So we've tried to make that overt, that it's okay. Let's just do what we can. We'll be fine. So for the most part, we transitioned really well. But we've seen, as you know, as it feels like it's dragged on, right? This is like week 4 or something. It's starting to get a little bit old for some people. So we're just keeping a very close eye on that. More recently, our head of people and culture brought in an initiative to offer employee assistance programs globally, where people can speak to a counsellor, you know, anonymously. It's fully confidential, and so we're setting that up now, just as a secondary line. And if people want to go speak to someone, they may not want to talk to their direct manager, or, you know, they just want someone they can just, you know, spitball stuff with. So that's something we're bringing online now, and it felt like the right time, and we're fortunate enough that we can, you know, crack on and do that. So I think we're fortunate that we could transition and keep productive and not really slow down the rate of production of design work or engineering work for that side of the business. The other side of the business that's SaaS based, you know, people can just log in via a browser to self-serve, that side of things. So support there has been fine. So yeah, it's for us, I think the challenges have been more around just the health and well-being of our staff as people, more so than the work. And, you know, to Brian's point, you know, we've tried to also advocate and, you know, tell stories and say, hey, you're making an impact. This is important. You know, there's 9 out of 10 kids home at the moment globally. There's kids in rural America that have no internet. People are driving to McDonald's or outside school to try to do their homework. What else can we do? What are we not doing? And trying to get that, you know, call to action through the entire organization. As much as us leaders, you know, feel that burning, I think it's important that everyone sort of has that sense of, you know, responsibility and accountability to make that difference. So yeah, it's been an interesting time. I think in many ways we've been fortunate, but yeah, there's been some adjustments. And as I said, the focus has really been on just health, well-being of the staff.
That's great. Thank you, Paul. I feel the same. You know, we've been very humbled by this whole thing, because obviously we're an essential part of the broadband business, the whole industry. And we were the same way. We said, okay, everyone, we understand you got people at home, you know, that now are in your environment, your children, they need help. They need to, you know, I have an 8-year-old that, you know, barely could get on a computer, that now knows more about Zoom than I know, you know? And so it's been amazing to see how resilient the kids are, but through this change. But we've been really, from our standpoint, making sure that we're keeping communication open, touching people as much as we can virtually, and making sure we're hearing them out and talking through, and we're doing the same thing, Paul, letting people know that everything's different. Everything's different. So if you know, we're still need to get our work done, but we also know you have a totally different thing to manage at home. And if you're on later in the evening or earlier, it's all good. We're all just, and so for us, from a productivity standpoint, we haven't skipped a beat, and that's been amazing. But I personally do have a lot of concern to make sure, as you've pointed out, this 4th week now is starting to weigh on us, everybody, right? It's like, this is weirder and weirder, and we really got to make sure we're all looking out for each other. So thank you, Brian and Paul. Those are great comments. All right, so let's move on to the next topic. But first and foremost, let's do a check-in. How are we all doing on our surveys? I need a check. Are we doing okay? All right, everyone's good. All right.
No, I made a mistake. I thought Nick wasn't spelling correctly. I thought it was Beards in broadband. So I had to push this baby out. And so I've got a Jones soda. That's what I've got, guys.
Touche, Mr. Wortham, touche. All right, so perfect, let's move on. So the next one is rules of engagement. Obviously, they've changed for our people on job sites or dealing directly with customers, partners. Everything's changed. So I'd really like to talk about, kind of those rules of engagement and what have you had to do to obviously put together new rules to focus on keeping your teams as safe as possible, and of course your customers as well as the partners you work with. So let's start this one off with Nathan. What are the situations that you're running into, and how are you dealing with them?
So, I mean, we're dealing with a lot of the same things that Brian and Paul are, as far as just trying to keep our people safe, having the daily COVID calls, constant updates to our team, those engaging conversations with them about the importance of what we're actually doing in the field. And so for our guys, we've tried to issue them new PPE with guidelines on how to use it: face mask, gloves, hand sanitizer for the trucks, sanitizing solution for the vehicles, the office when they're there. We put in new guidelines to restrict access to our facility from everybody, including our customers. I mean, we've asked our customers to only respond to us remotely through phone calls or through Zoom meetings as well. And, when we're out in the field and going into businesses, we find that most businesses around here in South Louisiana are closed. Doors locked, everybody's gone, everybody's at home. So we struggle to complete a lot of the projects that were being issued because of that. So, there's some challenges in that, but it's just a constant education to the team, a constant conversation with them, and engaging the customer in that conversation as well, but just trying to keep the remote thing going, the social distancing, and it's working out. I mean, everybody's been very accommodating. I mean, we've all had to change the way we do things. So it's, it's going.
So you said something interesting. You guys are holding a kind of a daily call just around this topic. And how does that work with the team? Is it kind of just something where you guys, because of course we're all learning day by day, right?
Yeah.
New situations. Is that
yeah.
the purpose of it?
Yeah, we cover the new laws, whatever's been talked about that day. I mean, everything's changing day to day. I mean, really hour to hour. So every afternoon we're hosting a call. All of our leadership staff is on it. We've got multiple office locations around the U.S. that we're dealing with. So everybody's on that call. We're talking about every, scenario that we're dealing with, how what has changed in the last 24 hours, and then how we're proceeding with that. And so it's been very fruitful. We get a lot of feedback from the guys, and that, they don't feel as worried in that.
Kind of having that constant communication.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, it's
the more you know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're all dealing with it, day by day. Thank you. That's great. Danny, with you, has some of your safety or training protocols on site had to change at all during some of this change?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, we're pretty small, so that's been helpful. So we can keep guys separated for the most part. Most of the crews act fairly independently. So we don't necessarily meet up every morning and with large groups of people. So that's been helpful. The big thing is keeping guys out of, to be quite honest with you, on small crews, keeping out of gas stations, keeping out of places where they can congregate. So we put more porta-johns out on site where we're working. That's been honestly the biggest change, just to keep them out of those gas stations and stuff like that. Getting them water out there in the morning, just having one person on the gas station stuff. I mean, that's been the biggest change for us. As far as our customers, I'm usually the one, or the foreman, just kind of, that's the only person that deals with our customers, to kind of limit the contact there. And that's been the biggest thing. So there's some customers are requiring of us that we wear face masks and stuff now too. So we've had to purchase some of those things, and to be honest, it's hard to find them. So sometimes you just have to go cut shirts off of sleeves, or sleeves off of shirts and stuff like that, and make a face mask for them to wear. But it's just been some just small things like that. But luckily for us, we're pretty decentralized. Our foremen are pretty autonomous generally, so we've tried to keep that continuing through this and trying to keep things as normal as possible. And I found that through any times there are stressful situations, to keep everything as normal as you can. And that's what we've kind of been doing. So as normal as you can. It's hard to do it now.
I agree with that. If I may chime in, we're finding a lot of our employee discussion in Slack is about non-COVID stuff. So they're making light of something they watch on TV or music they're listening to or how well they're doing in a video game. But the other thing that's interesting is when I'm hearing these stories, there's also that employee that wants to participate, right? And so we've had a situation where we had a couple of installers have to be at home per our new policy, and that policy is not easy to write because the government puts out rules and then healthcare puts out rules. So we spent the first 10 days reworking policy, coming up with our own, and so we decided we're going to have somebody that's been exposed until a test comes back off work for 14 days. And having a field personnel, a field worker, stay at home when they're used to being outside, used to working, and they want to be, they want to have an impact in their community. That's hard. They're chomping at the bit to get back to work, and so that's another challenge we're facing. Is not only we're trying to set up new policies, which we set up that 14-day, and then literally that night I saw something on Twitter where the medical professionals in Utah said it's 72 hours, right? We just had to stick with our policy. But the hard part about that is the employee that's wanting to work, right? And so we actually had a few managers of ours step up and donate PTO because these guys are going to burn through their PTO. And some of this wouldn't be under the federal guidelines of the FFCRA that just came out. And so what we see is actually the employees banding together to some degree, but they're not talking about this, as much as there is water cooler talk, and they want to work.
Yeah, we're having the same thing. What's really interesting about all of this is that it's very clear guidelines once you have symptoms, clearly quarantine, that's very, very clear. But when you're been exposed, then how do you define that? And I'm curious, Brian, what you guys may have done or anyone else, when you have an employee that went to do an install at a house, and then, after the install, they tell you that they've been tested positive, which I believe you've actually had that experience, if I remember our conversation the other day, or something like that. What do you deem is a prolonged exposure where they're then at risk? I'm just curious to your thoughts, because that seems to be kind of a gray area.
We've had 3 employees that we've sent home under this policy, and we've basically had them stay at home until a test result comes back of someone they're exposed to. So we've played it safe, is what we've done, because we want our employees to be healthy, and we don't want them bringing that to work. And so they've got to be totally symptom-free until that, or we're letting them come back prior to the 14 days if a test result comes back negative. So we're being overly cautious right now, and we're actually going over and above what medical profession says to do, because just this week we're hearing, well, you can actually transmit it before you have symptoms, right? So I'm glad we set this policy early on, and I'm glad we stuck to it. And like I said, with people donating their PTO so that those at home can use it, it's actually helping our employees feel more tight-knit.
If I can just add to that as well, from our experience, as soon as we saw what was happening and we needed to fly people home, whether that was flying people that we had out here in the US back to Australia, or Americans that were in Australia back to the US, it was mandatory 14-day quarantine, irrespective of whether you had symptoms or not. The fact that you were on planes or at airports. One of the first things we did, it feels like 4 weeks ago now, was that we try to limit travel through the major hubs, like LAX and things like that. So we try to limit that, and then it was either way, you're 14 days at home quarantine. And that in some instances has meant that the people that they lived with had to move out. So we've had that on a few occasions where family members or others, we've said, look, you might as well go, because you're traveling together, go to this house. They will move to someone else's house for 14 days. And then we had someone who had a relative coming home from Korea. She moved out of her own house and would live with her parents for 14 days. So her sister could be quarantined. So, you know, we've had people band together and look out for each other in different ways. But in terms of trying to stay ahead of it and be proactive, that's something that we did very early on, is like, you know, we don't care. Like, you're traveling, you're 14 days. Like, go sit at home, get quarantined, and we'll drop off care packages. We'll make sure you got stuff. But yeah, please don't. Initially it was don't come into the office. And then as we mentioned, once we said, okay, you know, mandatory work from home, it's, you know, it's bled into that.
Absolutely. So it's just amazing day by day how this thing's changing. And I think our common theme around people is obviously keep the communication lines open, right? You can't talk to your people enough. So I think we all seem to be standing pretty strong on that. So I'm kind of curious, we've talked about how we're engaging with our customers, all of us, and on site and this and that. How are you guys, and if it's come up or not, engaging with partners? You know, obviously, Brian, you're a service provider. You know, you have a lot of partners from different, you know, manufacturers that sell technology solutions. How are you dealing with them right now if they want to come in and work with you on a new solution? Lots of times there's a proof of concept. Are you putting those kinds of things on hold right now? Or have you guys worked around some scenarios to try to work through that? Us personally, we have a scenario we're working with a municipality. They've got their offices shut down. We're building a data center for them, but now we can't get access. And they haven't figured out through this situation, you know, what's the right way to give us access, keep everyone safe. So now we're kind of starting to see a slowdown from that particular situation, just because they don't have kind of rules of engagement set that will make folks feel comfortable. So I'm just curious with anyone of the team, and maybe Brian, you could start, you know, kind of partners that come in to sell to you. How are you working with them?
We're pretty used to being a test bench ourselves, because we don't have that many vendors venture this far north. But two things I would say about that is our work orders have tripled. So our field work has actually tripled. So we're actually training new employees in the field right now during all this. And we have to respond because we have customers leaving the service, and then we have more customers signing up for the service because their DSL is not sufficient or something similar. And they don't have the upload to do video conferencing and VPN, and there's a challenge there, right? So our problem is we're tripling in work orders, and we're seeing the competitiveness of equipment in the marketplace being limited by CAF purchasers, for instance. So right now, money's going out for CAF 2, you know, reverse auction winners, and so some of our vendors are actually having to build up their staff too. So one of the first things we did, week number 1, we issued $250,000 in POs just for extra gear, right? Just to stock up on gear so that we're ready, because we knew that this extra activity would hit. And then 2 weeks after we bought that gear, now we're seeing the work orders triple. You're on mute, Brian.
Anyone else want to comment to that? Thank you. Thank you. Keeping me on point, Brian.
Yeah, if I can, just a couple of things from my perspective, and the way we operate. If we're launching on a new project with customers, we typically like to get face-to-face. The way we do this stuff, as Brian, you've seen, it's very hard to explain over a video conf and talk and demonstrate some of the wares. So we like to get face-to-face. And so, you know, historically, we've always had these establishment workshops. We fly people wherever they need to go to be with customers, sometimes for a few days, sometimes for a few weeks, depending on the size of the project and the complexity. So we initially thought, okay, well, that's on pause. We're not going to do much of that. And, you know, to Brian's point, we've had an influx of people reaching out to us saying, hey, this is happening now. It's not happening next year. It's happening now. Can you please help? And so we internally have had to reimagine how we do that. It's like, guess what? That's not going to happen face-to-face anymore. How do you figure out how you build trust when you can't physically be in the same room with someone? You know, we typically share a meal with the organizations that we work with, right? Typically a lunch or a coffee or something. And because you want to build rapport, you're going to be around these people for a long time. So that's something that we've internally, the team have worked hard to understand, and how do we pivot the way we do that? It's like, okay, you're not going to be face-to-face for a while. How do you effectively build trust, build rapport, share a beer like this virtually to get on with it? And to extend to that, it's similar with onboarding. We're about to, you know, hit the trigger on about 6 interns here in Denver. And when it's hit, we're like, hang on, we don't have an office to house these interns and get them, you know, acclimated to the way we operate. So we had to put that on ice because it's like, well, hang on, we typically do this as a cohort. Everyone does it together, face to face. So that's all being reimagined now, and we're having to do that virtually. Similarly with, we have a need because you know, everything's expanding, you know, the operations team are looking at bringing on project managers. And it's like, well, again, we used to do this face to face. Now we can't, like, you know, we can't expect them to move to be at our office because that's not possible. How do they get up to speed remotely? So that's some of the stuff that we're seeing from our perspective.
That's great. Any other comments?
Yeah, I'll answer Brian's question here. You know, Brian, it's difficult. My phone rings pretty much all day, every day with our vendors that we're dealing with on a regular basis, trying to figure out how to build those relationships with us and who else they need to be reaching out to try to continue to build those relationships. I mean, we struggle to purchase our everyday equipment, our everyday tooling, you know, through the vendors because they struggle to get it. And, you know, it's hard to find new ones as well because the people are they're not, things are different. Things are very different.
So Nathan, are you starting to see some challenges on the supply chain aspects of things?
We are. I mean, we're seeing a lot of lead times on testing gear. We just bought a couple OTDRs and it took 8 weeks. It's typically, you know, 2 weeks to get them. So 8 weeks is a long time.
Definitely. About as long as it takes to get toilet paper, I hear.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, great. That's good stuff. All right, check in. I think I'm out of beer. I'm gonna have to pour another beer here. So I'm gonna, like, cracking sound is gonna be that famous sound everyone likes to hear. Yes. All right, so let's think about, let's transition. So what about, I'm kind of curious to just carry on to this topic right now. You know, Paul, new sales calls, you know, like trying to talk is, you know, there's an aspect, and I know I feel personally, and I know some of you do too, where our current business with our current customers is still exceptionally strong. But there's always this aspect as a business leader of, you know, continuing to fill the funnel with new opportunities. And, you know, how are you guys going about that, especially like in business relationships? Consumer might be obviously, you know, a little bit different, but in that business relationship, I'm kind of curious, you know, what you guys are doing. One thing I've personally done is, of course, you know, had a conversation like this, virtual, you know, let's have a beer with maybe a customer I'm already comfortable with. And I've also sent people food for lunches, you know, where you do Grubhub or Uber Eats. You know, it's like, hey, let's do that lunch, you know, pick off this, I'm going to send you lunch, and let's have that meeting, right? And we do our video, we still eat. It's a little weird at first, but then once you have the video, you overcome it pretty quick. So I'm just kind of curious if any of the team has thought of anything kind of interesting to try and think of, you know, kind of that new initial engagement. I think it's easy for us to keep the engagements going on with our existing base, right? you have these relationships, but what about that new engagement? You know, I'm kind of curious if anyone's got anything specific that might be worth sharing, that might be different to think about, right?
Yeah, happy to share if I can kick off.
Yeah.
Look, the reality for us has been that we typically do really good when we present, speak, or a panelist at trade shows. And we had two coming up. There was one I think, we had Broadband Communities, we had Fiber Connect, both where we had a panel discussion on a major project that highlighted the way, the way we operate and the value we can bring. So historically, we've done, a lot of really good lead generation out of events, out of conferences, face to face. People come to the booth, here, play with the software, see what you think. So for us, being brutally honest with everyone on the call, we looked at this and went, hang on, that's done. Like, that's not happening for 6 months. So those leads that we're expecting in the funnel are not going to be there through our standard, segments or ways that we're going to market and get in and do sales and lead gen. So for us, something that we've had to think deeply about is, okay, how else can we keep filling the funnel? Brian, to your point, right? So, and that's why, the marketing team and the sales team have been looking at, okay, things like, this, virtual meetings, virtual roundtables, other ways to engage with the community and, other people out there doing this sort of work that we all do, to see if that way we can share leads and share business and things like that. Because as I said, for us, that's been one of the greatest sources, was getting in front of people and saying, this is what this is what we firmly believe in. This is why what we've done so far we think is dumb. So that really worked. So it's been fascinating and challenging for us at the same time, because that's dried up at least for 6 months. So we're trying to figure that out. Thankfully, we've had some of our existing channels have just are doubling down on their stuff. So when we're not short of work. There's more coming in organically, but it's one of those things where we need to figure out what other ways we can tackle. What other mechanisms can we use to get traction outside of what we're doing originally and looking forward to, that's served us well. We've only been in the US for really properly for a couple of years. Even though I commuted for 3.5 years, that doesn't really count. So we really rely on that face-to-face, getting out, amongst other professionals to build those relationships, right? So that's been pretty tough in terms of just, standard ways of marketing that, have worked for us before. So we're really having to think differently about that, look to digital and other streams to promote what it is we do and how we promote it.
So it sounds like you guys are focusing more digital, more networking.
Yeah, I think we have to, because as I was saying, we relied so heavily on conferences that, they're not happening until later this year. So I'm sure we'll do fine out of those. But until then, what do? We can't sit idle. So it's interesting. But I think things like this, Brian, that, you and your team have been nice enough to host. I think these are going to be key for just keeping connected with other industry leaders, and hopefully there's some momentum of conversation. And ultimately, I personally, for me, it's more about being connected than necessarily trying to get sales coming in the pipe. It's hey, what are other people doing? Let's do this as a team. And as we're huge advocates of, we think this is a team sport. This should be done together. Trying to solve these problems needs to be done as a team. And because of that, we need to stay connected with others to do that, to fulfill that mission.
Absolutely.
Now, I'm concerned about the trade shows as well. That's how we sell a lot of our stuff. We have a wholesale division called Mammoth Networks, and we have the Visionary Broadband division, and we sell at trade shows for both those. And what we find is it's a longer sale, or it's a relationship. So we meet someone in person, face to face, take them to lunch, see them at the trade show, catch up with them. And that's been our secret sauce as a competitive provider, meaning I'm not a phone company, I'm not a cable company. my strategy has always been show up at their doorstep, right? And we're finding that is going to, we're discussing that internally because our strategic aspect has entirely flip-flopped because we're not going to have trade shows. We're not able to go face to face. And the second part of that is there's certain personalities that only do well face to face, right? They have a tough time with translation over the phone, and they rely on body language and whatnot. And so, I don't think video conferencing prior to now has really been a means of communication for us, especially from a sales standpoint. But I could see with adoption during this virus pandemic that I could see it being more acceptable. It's suddenly more acceptable to have a video conference in your home, right? So
Exactly.
we're making another step, but I don't think it's a replacement for face to face.
And I'm sure you're the same, Brian, but I have customers, I'm sure we all have them, that face-to-face is the only way. It's like you just schedule that call once a month or once a quarter and you get on a plane, and that's just the way it is. That works, and that's what works for them, right? And I was fortunate enough to get to do that just before, all the flying stopped. Where I did that. It's like, okay, I think this is an opportunity to get that in, even because I know I need to get it in face to face. So I spent a few days there. But yeah, it's I hear you. It's going to be interesting.
But in the service provider world too, we have customers calling wanting to upgrade. So I'm not concerned about new customers right now. I'm concerned about taking care of my existing customers because they are hospitals, they are counties, they are sheriff's offices. So we have work. And we're excited about that, and we're happy to help, but we're not focused on new business at all in our neck of the woods.
I gotta say too, I think that this pandemic has pushed the digital marketing forward that has been kind of holding back for a while, especially in this industry. Like, so I've kind of had this on my mind a long time, but social media marketing is going to take a more front role going forward, especially in the trade industry. Like for us with splicing and aerial work, you don't see a lot of that stuff on social media. As the industry gets younger and stuff, that's going to be more responsive. It's kind of where the attention is, right? So if you have younger folks coming in the industry, their attention's on social media. If you can leverage that, I think through this pandemic, you're going to be and kind of forward, you're going to be in a good position. So that's something I've had, like I said, in my mind for a long time, something I wanted to do, put together more of a social media presence, like on YouTube, some of those other platforms that I think will push forward. And we've already, I don't do a whole lot on LinkedIn, but I kind of post once in a while, comment, try to certain things that I think are kind of neat, some good articles. And we've actually picked up some customers from that recently, especially. So I think those avenues of social media marketing, again, it's where the attention is, and especially when everybody's stuck at home, that's what they're going to do. So I think that's going to be something that this pandemic pushes to the forefront as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree with you on that, Danny. I'm kind of curious on the construction front, both for you, Danny, and Nathan, and just some of your thoughts in terms of what are you guys seeing in some of the areas you're working? Both, are you having any challenges with any of the municipalities being able to give you permits because maybe the office is closed or they're working remote and they're not used to that? Subs that you guys work with and manage that are maybe having some kind of challenge with one thing or another. I'm just kind of curious to your thoughts there, maybe both in what is already happening or maybe what might be keeping you up at night.
I'll jump in. We have had some issues with different municipalities actually asking us to not work in the area because they don't have the staff there if we do damage something to make the repairs. We've had a couple of municipalities tell us that if we did damage something, the repairs would be on us. So we've had to make those decisions on whether or not we're actually going to continue through with those projects and how we can do it safely and with causing or not causing any damage at all. Which is always the goal, right? But I mean, some things are inevitable. Other than that, we haven't seen any other issues, but we have had some some areas where we've had to shut down operations completely just because the locals don't have the staff there to manage.
Yeah, Brian, we've had locate issues have been the big one for us, honestly, lately. 811, you know, when this pandemic started, 811 shut down operations completely for a few days, and that backlogged a lot of things. And we've got a job up in Arvada right now that is kind of on hold until we get locates for anchors. We got, you know, 9 or 10 anchors to place up there, and we got a lot of responses back from some entities that they would not come locate any utilities unless it was their own utilities anyways, unless it was an emergency. So that's kind of been the sticking point for us as far as the aerial side has just been the locates for the anchors and such. So it's been a holdup. It's been kind of a pain.
Okay. Yeah, for us too, a couple municipalities have had some challenges with no one being, you know, there, shortage of workers, similar to what Nathan has said. So yeah, we're feeling that too. And on one side of the coin, you know, we're feeling more work coming at us, but then there's obviously these dependencies that we rely on, that if we can't get permits and locates and things like that, the work won't move forward. So it's really interesting. And I know personally keeping me up at night are some of those things, right? You can get a great job, and if you can't get permits, we're hosed, right? So it's been really interesting. And each one of these municipalities, none of them have gone through this. So they're all like us on the fly, figuring out, you know, their protocols and how they're going to deal with it. And each week it's of course changed, and we're having to change with them. So, okay, great. Any other comments to that anyone might want to add in? I think we're actually about 9 minutes away from kind of wrapping things up for our first Beer and Broadband. Well, I guess maybe one thing right now would be like, what would be something that you feel like is keeping you up at night, and something you'd like to share with the team that either you might not have the answer for it right now, but and if you do, that's great. If it's something you've encountered that you really want to share with the group that's listening today, or it's something that's not solved, and it's something to kind of throw out there for us to talk about as a group, and not sure if we'll solve it either. However, it might be something that's important to us all. So kind of like to go around the room, and again, you know, something that's keeping you up at night, that either you've you know, dealt with already, figured out maybe a workable solution that you might want to share, or something you're concerned about. I know I personally have a long list of things in this new environment we're living in, but I'd love to hear from some of the team on that. Who wants to start?
I can start. I've been spending a lot of time thinking about the business strategy of this, because you've got to protect your cash in this time. You're going to have customers pay you late. You're going to have bad debt, a drop in revenue, and that means you have a limit in your ability to do something with your cash. So the decision that I'm thinking about each night and reading about, you know, just article after article after article, is the business strategy of when to jump in and how long to protect that cash, because we find ourselves in a great position. We've grown on cash for all these years. We're not really highly leveraged, and everything I'm reading says you know, make sure you're not leveraged in a time like this. And so we're in a fortunate position. Not everybody is, and in some respects, I feel bad for that, right? Like there's a lot of sentiment out there about, you know, I care about people being healthy, and I also care about my friend's business, right? You're seeing a lot of people post out on social media, but there's also the aspect of, and this is what's keeping me up at night, is when to invest and when to be conservative with my cash flow.
Yeah, just to jump in on that and extend, Brian, I think for us, yeah, we've always been bootstrapped as well. So we can only grow as well as we can profit out of the work we do. So even though we're in a fortunate position as a business. One of the things we did do, you know, and it was across the group, was right. What makes sense to? Is there any ways that we can save right now? So if we want to hang on to cash, what discretionary spend can we limit? So we did a few things. You know, worked tightly with my CFO. One of the first things we did is reach out to everywhere where we were leasing an office, and said, "Hey, we're not coming in for 3-6 months. What can you do for us?" And you know, no harm, no foul type thing. And you know, we're very grateful for the fact that everywhere they did something. So we immediately had a cost saving in terms of premises. So across, you know, 3 or 4 offices, we saved you know, a good chunk of change. Essentially, like a decent FTE, right? Which is, for me, is an amazing saving, right? Because I'm trying to save jobs, right? Worst case. Beyond that, we looked. So that was one of the quick wins for us. Our business is relatively straightforward in terms of P&L. One of the biggest levers that we have to play with is travel. So that was a no-brainer. Like, travel stopped. So we're already saving money because we're not traveling as much as we used to. Obviously, there's downsides of that, as I said before, but that's a big saving in terms of travel, not jumping on planes, international travel. And the other part that we looked really deeply at was software. You know, we spend a lot of money in terms of the software we use to enable our services and our SaaS product. And we took stock. We did an audit of everything we use. Is it critical? Is it not? Where can we save? And for those that, again, similar to what we did with rent, we actually called up the vendors of our major providers, some of which we spend hundreds of thousands a month, and said, "Hey, can you cut us a deal? Because, you know, we're going to use you, but, you know, times are interesting and we're just trying to save money." And again, for the most part, everyone came to the party somehow and gave us a discount for 3 months. Most of the discounts we got for leasing or rent and for software for at least 3 months. So we saved, you know, double digits in terms of cost just by those simple things. So we're fortunate enough we haven't had to, you know, let people go, you know, and we're in a great position. It's strong, but we felt it was, you know, to your point, you know, how do we, you know, keep tight on the cash? And that was some of the things that we did, just to share. And we did that pretty quickly. Like, there was an imperative, you know, from the board to get onto that. So, and it wasn't difficult, right? It was literally phoning up the people that we have these things with and saying, "Hey, can you do anything?" And it was great that people came to the party on that. So yeah, it worked well for us.
Yeah, that's huge. Paul, we've been doing the same type of thing, and it's been amazing. You know, you're talking to other business leaders, typically, you know, that maybe owns your building or this or that, and everyone's in the same boat. We're all dealing with this, and everyone's trying to figure out how do we help each other, right? Because of course they don't want to lose a tenant that you might have a long-term lease with, or is using your software, you know, because the software, if you can't get a discount, it might just cause you to try to look at something else as a pure cost-saving initiative. So as we all know, it's a lot easier to give someone a price break and keep them as a customer than clearly try to reacquire them later after we've already lost them or they've lost us. So I think you're right. I mean, really just we've done the same thing, just going down our absolute, everything that we spend money on. And it's a phone call. "Hey guys, we're all dealing with this, trying to figure out how we can kind of reduce our cash flow, work on some different terms. Just curious." And really, even what I've done most of the time is ask them, "What have you guys done for others?" Right? I'm calling and I'm just trying to figure it out, and we're just trying to do the best we can to hold on to our cash, obviously, through this time. So I think that is a huge aspect, and I've been very thankful for the extreme openness on the other side of the table. It has not been a difficult thing to do at all. Call and ask, right? And do it, like you said, immediately. We're not sure how long this is going to go. There's a lot of uncertainty out there, and cash is king.
I know we're almost out of time, but the uncertainty you just talked about, that that's something that I'm thinking about too, right? What can we talk about? Because we can't talk about sports. We can't talk about what we're doing this weekend, right? We can't talk about what we ate out at dinner last night. So there's a need to focus everyone on the positives, right? And that comes back to the storytelling I talked about earlier. But it's something I think about at night. What can we talk about tomorrow?
Absolutely. I think for one thing for Bonfire is we've always tried to run a very transparent organization. We rely on all our business leaders to help make wise decisions of the company. I certainly do not want to make them all myself, and will never scale if I have to make them all myself. So it is really about putting a lot back out on the other leaders of the company, as well as individuals, right? We've had some of our best ideas come from individuals. Not even a business leader within the group. So I think having that open and communication and putting the challenges that are out there right out, to the team and asking them for help and ideas is probably one of the best things you can possibly do for your organization. Because if you've done a good job in hiring, then you should pat yourself on the back, because you have an amazing team that can provide a lot of value outside of what they normally been doing, right? We're all working through this together. We've had people step up to show us how to make, do-it-yourself PPE, right? It's not like we can all just put an order in and get a bunch of gloves and masks delivered. That's not going to happen. So what are you doing to work around it? We've asked our team, what ideas. People have come to the table with all kinds of amazing ideas, and it's just like what Paul was saying. If you don't ask for a discount on a service, you're never going to get it. So do the same thing with your employees. Ask them for help, right? Ask them to contribute, especially the frontliners, right, that are out there with the customers every single day, working with partners. Ask them what they think, because they are thinking about it every day, just like we are as leaders. So we've got to make sure we bridge that gap. Keep things very open, and you get some of your best ideas from leveraging obviously your team and keeping that open environment. So I guess with that, I just want to kind of bring this thing to a close. This has been awesome. I really appreciate all of you guys. Some great conversation today. This has been a great inaugural beer and broadband discussion. I hope to continue these, and we're going to make this recording available out there, so we'll share it. And I again really do appreciate all your time and participation. I know everyone's extremely busy these days, which we're all thankful for and very humbled. And with that, I'll close today's session. Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Everyone have a great day. We'll see y'all.